Hi everyone. I decided to come up to the prayer log for a change. I've been walking on flat fields now for 4 months, so it's dried out, everywhere's dried out. I've kind of half biked up here and half pushed it because that's where I'm at the moment. I'm not the fittest person in the world. Anyway, we have 3 questions to look at in the chapter that we've just seen. 3 big questions. We are really in the very heart of the book of Acts now. The first missionary journey has come to an end. Paul has made his conclusions known to the disciples and to the leadership team. So let's just rewind it back and look at what happens in Acts chapter 14. So they come across a man that has been crippled from his mother's womb. Of course, the apostle Paul looks at him intently, tells him to get up. He gets up. It's an incredible miracle. Now then, I've mentioned before, and you can talk to missionaries, they'll tell you the same thing, that whenever the gospel is pushed into new frontiers, there's always a spike in the miraculous. That's why it says at the end of Mark, these signs shall follow them. Follow who? Follow those that are pushing the boundaries of the gospel. Now, in this last year, although we have not been physically pushing the boundaries of the gospel, we've entered into a new season. The world has, not just the church, the entire world has entered into a new season. And with that new season, there's come again a spike in the miraculous, a spike in what I would call God incidences, a spike in the Lord setting up appointments and things. I've never known a time like this in my life. I've never known such an openness. Paul's conclusion to Acts 14 is that God truly has opened a door for the Gentiles, and I'm absolutely convinced that God has opened a door through this COVID-19 of which we never had before. I'll give you another example. This happened 3 days ago. This is just another example. When we moved, we've been on there now for 4 months, exactly 4 months. When we moved on to there 4 months ago, we were on our own. There was somebody else on in a tent, but they went pretty quick because it started to get cold. And then a young couple turned up in an old classic Mercedes van. But I think he is 27. I think his partner's about 31, something like that. Young couple, really nice, very, very friendly. Very, very intelligent couple. And it's, you know, you try to just be friendly and be nice. And I've helped to repair some of the things on his camper van. Nothing, just waited and waited for the opportunity. I haven't gone in there like a bull in a china shop with the gospel, but I can't remember when it was now. It was about 3 days ago. They invited us to go and have something to eat by the fire. Sometimes they have a fire at the farm just to burn rubbish. And the moon was just rising. I don't know if you saw it, but there was a blood red moon, and it looked enormous, and it was just rising as we got together. So, you know, I've been thinking for a while, how are we going to share the gospel with this couple? Lovely couple, dead easy to get on with. Anyway, this guy's a professional musician, incredibly intelligent young man. One of the most intelligent young men I've ever, if not the most intelligent young man I've ever met in my life. And he invited us to go by the fire. Well, he took his classical guitar, nylon string guitar, and I thought, this is going to be great. So we went over by the fire, got his guitar, and would you believe it, he starts to sing old-time blues gospel songs like you were listening to a vinyl record from the 70s. It was beautiful. There was a fire burning, a red moon rising. I was just listening to this guy singing about the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, singing about the cross, singing about this. I'm thinking, you just couldn't make this up. You could not make this up. These are not Christians. And needless to say, we spent the next 3 hours predominantly talking about Jesus in the end. Of course, it began with COVID and their take on it. and their reasons for why they are doing what they're doing and so on. And there are many people without any kind of religious persuasion that know something really bad is going on. They just know it. It's kind of like an instinct in them. And it went from COVID to Jesus Christ. I found out that this young man had extensively studied every world religion, had extensively studied cosmology, biology, all manner of sciences, and he was a humble man as well. He was even a humble man. And the conclusion to it simply was this. He said, I long for a spiritual experience. In fact, I don't know if it's his brother takes DMT all the time. For those of you that don't know what DMT is, it's a drug that opens up a religious experience. It's a very powerful hallucinogenic drug that people say, you know, you almost go to heaven with it. I used to take hallucinogenic drugs, used to take massive doses of magic mushrooms, and it does give you a religious experience, but it's a demonic one. And this guy understood a lot. His conclusion was simply this: I just want to feel so open. Just, I couldn't believe it. And not just him, his partner, the pair of them. And me and Mandy are just like, at the end of the night, just walking away thinking, ever since we have gone on there, we have literally had a whole series of divine appointments. There is no doubt whatsoever that a door has just opened up, and it's been miraculous. My first question is simply this. Paul's conclusion to the first missionary journey was that a door has opened. So my first discussion point is simply this. Please don't talk about closed doors or stubborn people or people that are resisting the gospel. Forget all that for 1 minute. I want you to think in this last year, COVID, because it's been a year now, I want you to think about somebody that you've had a discussion with that normally would be totally closed, but actually you found that they were completely open to the gospel. Think about it. If you haven't had that experience, let somebody else talk, because we need to encourage one another that actually there really is an open door at this time. And we need that encouragement because it's happening. What you doing? What you doing? They want to play. Well, it was lovely yesterday, really warm. So we set up the awning. So if we ever have guests, we can sit outside and stuff. This is one of those funny times of the year, isn't it? Yesterday was so warm. They put the alpacas now on this top field. So I put the awning up thinking, you know, stick the awning up for a bit, and it's freezing this morning. Just one of them times, just not quite, it's not quite spring yet. Anyway, here's another really important point then of Acts 14. It is a major, it's the first missionary journey, and it has everything in it. Everything that could have gone wrong in a way went wrong for them, but everything that could have gone right went right. It was a mixture of absolute glorious victory and really terrible tribulation combined. So what you see right in the middle, this is of course a predominantly Gentile area. There's not even a synagogue, and when this incredible miracle happens and the man that was born a cripple from his mother's womb jumps up to his feet, they cry out, the gods have come down in the form of men. And the reaction from Paul and Barnabas is incredibly important, because what they didn't do is they didn't accept it. They didn't say, well, you know, we are quite talented and we're very important to God, and yeah, you know. And some Bible teachers believe that this was Paul's crossroad moment. He could have easily taken this praise and use the excuse that by being popular, you know, he's got more chance of getting the gospel out to a wider audience. But Paul's and Barnabas's response is that they run at the crowd, they tear the garments. Why? Because this is blasphemy. This is blasphemy. And of course we see again and again in the scripture, particularly in the book of Revelation, where they're bowing down to angels and the angels say, do not do it. So this is such a... Now the thing is, the sin of pride, I don't know what it is about the sin of pride, but it always seems to get overlooked. But it's clearly the seminal sin. You know, ye shall be as gods, Garden of Eden. The very first temptation was a pride issue. And this wanting to be somebody, you know, that everybody adores, is something that's huge inside of us. That's why we have film stars and pop stars and magazines about famous people and what they're up to and what they're doing. It is so much a part of society, and to be relevant, to be a somebody. And here was this moment that they could have been catapulted into the limelight, but they do the opposite. They rip the garments. They say, we're no different than you. Now my point is simply this, you know, it's not a nice thing to talk about, but there's been a problem with pride in the church for a very, very, very long time. I can remember when I was first saved, it didn't take long. 3-4 months in, you realise that Christians are not what you think. You realise that they're not the angels that you thought they were before you were saved. It doesn't take long for you to realise that Christians have a pride issue. There's a real competitiveness within the church, this kind of, you know, one-upmanship that you see from the mums and toddlers to the Sunday school to the very top leadership. There is a terrible issue with pride. Having said all that now, Paul and Barnabas' response to this first temptation was perfect. All right, so when you look in Second Chronicles 7:13, God says, when I send the pestilence, he says it's him that sends the pestilence. He says, if my people who are called by my name will, number one, humble themselves. Why does God say that? Because he knows the root problem with God's people is always pride, first and foremost. So we've had a year now of this, COVID. We've had an entire year of it, and we have to ask the question, what have we learned? What have we learned? Have we humbled ourselves? So my second question to you all is, and think about this on an individual basis, how have you changed for the better in this year? What has God done in your life this year that you look back and you think, you know, I do believe that God is working on me and he's changing me slowly for the better? Think about it. I don't mean you to answer this in a kind of a prideful way. That's not the point of this at all. It's to realise that actually there is a work happening. God is at work in our lives. I do believe there is a humbling process. So in what way has God changed you? And also, when you look at the church in general, you know, do you think there has been a humbling? Do you think that the people of God, I'm interested to know what people think. Do you think that people have humbled themselves? So that's the second question or discussion point. Now the third one is the conclusion of Acts 14. The conclusion is very interesting. The two things really that Paul says after that first missionary journey. Now, bearing in mind what he's been through. He went to Cyprus, the Bar Jesus stood against him, Sergius Paulus was saved. Remember, he was Bar Jesus was struck blind for a while. He goes over into Galatia, he gets really sick, but then he begins to preach the word of God in the synagogues. He gives them this terrific warning of what will happen if they don't turn to Christ, but many do. And then of course off the back of that there's division, there's slander, there's gossip, you name it. It all happened to Paul on his first missionary journey. I mean, he had to deal with the lot. And then off the back of all that, you know, he ends up seeing this incredible miracle, followed not many days after that by people turning on him completely, and they stone him to death. He's left for dead. So his conclusion of the first missionary journey, and he's turning to his leadership, and he's turning to the new Christian converts. His conclusion is that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of heaven. That's his conclusion in Acts 14. Now you compare that to what we consider to be, you know, Christianity today. I'm asking you this, you know, do you think there's something built into us today that kind of thinks, yeah, well, that is okay for then, but it's not applicable to us today in 2021? Or maybe, yeah, that's applicable to the time at the Reformation, or the terrible time under the dark ages of Catholicism, but it's not applicable to us in 2021. Or maybe, yeah, that's applicable to the church in China, or the church in Iran, or any place where there's persecution, but it's not applicable to us here. I wonder how we, when his conclusion is that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of heaven, do we honestly think that we're a part of that? I just want to know what you think on that. Do we think we're a part of that, or somehow in our minds have we kind of made ourselves exempt from it? So there's two parts to his conclusion. He says through many tribulations we will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he doesn't just say that. He also says, when he gets back to Antioch and he reports everything that's gone on, he says, truly God has opened an incredible door to the Gentiles. Now I think that is so important, because in those two, although they're kind of opposites of each end, one is tribulation, the other is an amazing door that's been opened, what we see really of Paul's conclusion is that you can't really have one without the other. So if you're going to see an open door and people begin to get saved, then you're going to have tribulation. You can't have one without the other. That seems to be Paul's conclusion. I'm not sure whether the church in the West could say either of those things over the last 30, 40 years. Neither could they say there's been great tribulations. Neither could they say there's been a great an open door. So I believe we're in a new season, whether we like it or not. And I wonder, in our minds, what would we prefer? And I ask myself this, friends, when I go out on these walks, I ask myself this same question. What would we prefer? To kind of go back to church and really not see that many people saved, and not really have those divine appointments, but just tick along, but there's no persecution, there's no real problems, the usual church problems, but nothing major? Or would we prefer what we see in the book of Acts, where there was a great door open, but there was also many tribulations that came with it? I wonder. It's going to take honesty to answer that question for all of us. But out of the two, what would we prefer?